Good morning. I'm gonna try it one more time because we got a full house in here. Good morning. Good morning. This is welcome to the joint meeting of the Board of County Commissioners and Durham Public Schools Board of Education. We're now in session. I want to take some time to extend a warm welcome to everyone. We have interpreters for this meeting today from Durham Public Schools Multilingual Resource Center. We want to thank you all for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started with our agenda. We have a full agenda, and we also have a full house. We know we have folks who are here who want to make public comment. And so we're going to start with the agenda review. For folks, I would like to ask that we move our public comment to the beginning of our agenda. Is that okay with
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, all right. Yeah.
Motion, move approval, agenda as amended.
Second. All right, it's been moved and properly second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from August 15th, 2023. So moved. Second. Been moved by Commissioner Howerton, seconded by Commissioner Alum. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda, we will go to public comment. I'm going to do a quick review of the rules before we get started. When you're coming up to the podium, please state your name. And if you're speaking for an organization, state your name and the name of the organization. Speakers are going to be asked to present their comments within, we're going to do 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on the podium, you'll have 1 minute left to stop winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep and that indicates that your time is up. We ask that complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in our open session. However, we're very interested in hearing your concerns with regards to public education and the community. Finally, board members will listen carefully and will consider your comments, but we do not engage in a discussion with our speakers. The first person to the podium, and please correct me if I mispronounce your names when you get up here, Jeremy Berggren, and followed by John Hodges Copel.
My name is Jeremy Berggren. My friends call me Germs. I'm in Can. My pronouns are they, them, or he, him, or child of God, because I saw some God stuff last night. I'm speaking about universal free lunch as a parent and a community member. When I heard about this joint meeting, I went back and I watched the September 14th presentation. It was pretty challenging. I went back through my notes and I realized that back in April that I knew as a father that there were approximately a handful of administrators that were blocking universal free lunch from being implemented district-wide. And I couldn't find out the answer, but I have these notes. I have a pretty good idea. As I understood it, it would have happened without any kind of county involvement, no money here or there. It was just a couple of folks. And I'm in a low income veterans union, and I bring that up. I wore my old shirt, Iraq Veterans Against the War. And a couple years ago, we had a reunion, one of my friends who died this past year from an eating disorder related to trauma. He said, remember when we thought we could end the war and we laughed? It was hard getting involved in this and doing this research because I realized it was just as complicated as war. Even if we get universal free lunch, there's a handful of, not even a handful, a ton of other problems. And I remember about when I joined the Marines back in '98, and the recruiter hands you like a bunch of cards, and it's like patriotism, some BS. And one of the reasons I joined the Marines is because of lunch, because I was on free lunch in high school. Because I was on free lunch in high school, and I needed free lunch in high school. Because I needed free lunch in high school. I needed free lunch in high school because I needed free lunch in high school. And so I joined the Marines. And when you join the Marines, you get free lunch, free breakfast, free dinner. You live in low income, affordable housing. That's what happens when you join the Marine Corps and you're a hungry kid with a high A score. And so I watched September 14th, and I watched the whole meeting. And I felt bullied. And I felt neglected. I used to teach bystander behavior for a national fraternity. And I felt like I could do a workshop on bystander behavior to frat boys about universal free lunch. And I felt that they would get it. You know what I'm saying? I felt that they would get it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have John Hodges Copel, followed by James Blake.
Hi, my name is John Hodges Koppel. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about the 10-year capital improvement plan, the 22 bond issue to finance that plan, and the role that DSA plays in achieving that plan. To start, I want to compliment the board and the staff. You're incredibly hardworking, and you obviously care deeply. I've met with many of you, and Mr. Davis and Mr. Johnson have taken time to discuss issues with me. I also want to be very clear that I don't think anyone has made a bad decision in the past, right? We make decisions based on the information we have at the time. A hard thing for leaders to do is to pause and reconsider decisions when conditions change. And I think changed conditions is what we face with our bond projects, DSA and the 7 elementary schools. In short, there seems to be at least a $100 million gap between the cost of those 8 projects and the funds available to build them. The largest part of this gap is the doubling in cost for the MOVE DSA option in the 2 years since it replaced an improved DSA option in the CIP. Now, I often have to remind myself of 2 simple things about packages of capital projects. First, we can't spend the same dollar twice. So every added dollar for a new DSA has to come from another project, since we can't build less than 100% of a new school. And second, we don't fund schools with bonds. We finance schools with bonds. The funding comes from the same property and sales tax that we use for all our other needs, schools and the rest of the county. And so bonds just let us reach into the future and get property and sales tax, bring it forward so we can use it sooner. If we increase financing to address higher costs, we just reach more into the future, delaying other projects. As a result, I think DPS and the county should take a brief pause, maybe wrapping up at your next joint meeting, to take a thoughtful, balanced, and community-engaged look at 3 options. Continue with the MOVE DSA option with the financing available, which will delay other projects. Continue with the MOVE DSA option and still fund those elementary schools, which will mean coming up with additional financing, and we need to be clear about where that would come from and how much. Or 3, complete all the elementary schools in the 2022 bond priority list while devoting a set amount of funding, probably about $100 million less than to build a new DSA, to improve and would use a major refurbishment on the current campus. This third option flips the script by assigning funding for DSA up front to do as much as possible to improve that school, rather than committing to a new school and paying whatever it takes.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Mr. Blake, followed by Letitia Williams.
Good morning. My name is James Blake. I'm the pastor of Fisher Memorial United Holy Church. Also serve as a Durham Can strategy team member and as a co-chair of the Durham Can Clergy Caucus. An active member of Durham Can Poverty Action Team, as well as parent of a former DPS student and a graduate of Hillside High School here in Durham. So since January of 2023, Durham Can Poverty Action Team has been researching food insecurity. Our relationships with the community and our ongoing research has revealed a need to address food insecurity in our communities, especially involving the children in our community. Our research has led us to explore the concept of universal free lunch for every student in DPS. This research has shown us a viable path to universal free lunch through the implementation of district-wide CEP community eligibility provision. The community eligibility provision allows eligible schools to serve free breakfast and lunch to all students regardless of income. And we are aware, based upon a presentation made September 14th, that there is a concern about how CEP could impact Title I funds. However, our research has shown us that the Title I funds would not be impacted, but the process for allocation of Title I funds would need to be revisited. In our conversations with school representatives from Bertie and Halifax counties, both of whom have agreed to discuss the success of their district-wide CEP programs with members of our school board, DPS would not lose Title I funding due to CEP. Additionally, organizations such as Food Research and Action Center and No Kid Hungry have produced succinct and accessible documents that explain the relationship between CEP and Title I funding. In short, our research has shown that there will be no overall loss of Title I funding, and the only changes to occur would be to decide which poverty data is used to determine the allotment of Title I funding, which includes a variety of options beyond free lunch applications, such as district certification data. In light of our research, Durham Can and our community partners are here today to ask a simple question. Will you, as leaders of Durham Public Schools and citizens of Durham County, take the lead in our community and even across our state in assuring that every student, regardless of their zip code or family income, is provided free meals through the implementation of district-wide CEP? And we have members of Durham Can who are with us. Ask if you would stand to show our support today.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Next, we have Letitia Williams, followed by Julia Borbley Brown.
Good morning. My name is Latasha Williams. You fine. I am a active leader of Durham Can Poverty Team. I am also a parent of a student who attends Southern Durham High School, and I am also a former student of Southern Durham High School. The Durham Can Action Poverty Team, which is made up of a combination of parents, grandparents, food insecurity workers, and community leaders from a base of 30 plus institutions, began working and researching food insecurity in January of this year. Our relationships with the community and our ongoing research revealed a need to address food insecurity in our communities by providing universal free school lunch to every student in DPS through the implementation of district-wide CEP. Our conversations revealed two things. Kids need free lunch, and they want better tasting and more nutritious lunch. Who said that lunch can't be flavorful and nutritious? As a parent, I have first seen when my child is hungry, she does not perform well in school. I've also seen that when she comes home and tries to eat me out of a house and a home because she has not eaten lunch, I simply ask the question, did you eat lunch today? And her response is, Mommy, no, I didn't, because it was nasty and it didn't look good or like your food. So by seeing my child coming home with these concerns really concerns me as a parent. Our research action team has found the same to be true in our research. We have identified the district-wide CEP will not only provide universal school free lunch to every DPS student, but it will open doors for improved academic performance when kids aren't hungry, increase student participation in school lunch programs, improve the quality and nutrition of school lunches, reduce the stigma imposed on low-income students already using free lunch school program, and decrease administrative burden placed on low-income parents from free lunch applications. In conversation with Nutrition Office of Bertie County, who implemented district-wide CEP in 2014, we were told that parents are quite content with the program, that the kids love it. Durham Can and our community partners are here today to ask, will you support the implementation of district-wide CEP, knowing that it will benefit our kids' nutrition and assist improving academic performance and alleviate the financial burdens accrued from the cost of school lunch? This request is deeply supported by the 30 plus member institutions of Durham Can and our community partners who are here today in this room and also outside. If all members of Durham Can could please stand with me today in support. Thank you.
you. After Julia, it'll be Walt Barron and Lee Boardley.
Yes, I'm Julia Borbely Brown, and I am a person who's been long interested in public education in my 50-plus years in Durham. I want to address one of the core beliefs of the school system, which is that Durham Public Schools must be intentional in acting collaboratively and involving all stakeholders. And I think with the bond issue and the now proposed idea of building a new DSA, this core belief has not been followed. In my opinion, as you probably know, the stakeholders include teachers, staff, students, parents, guardians, neighbors, and the general public. And I think that there has not been an adequate outreach to the community to know that there is the distinct possibility that rather than renovate 7 elementary schools, which very much need renovation, we will build a new high school. And why does this matter? I think it as John has stated, we will have to have another bond issue or some way of financing, and you will need the community support in order to pass something like that. And I believe that the parents and other stakeholders at the elementary schools are not aware of the change that's happening. And I know that very few people were aware of the idea that there would be this shift in the monies. And I understand that costs have gone up greatly, but I think it would be a better plan to have more engagement of the community as you make a decision about what to do in the future. I know that it's very challenging, but I think it's rewarding to involve the community. And I believe also that a number of the stakeholders would view this idea of deferring the maintenance of the elementary schools as neglect of them. And many would also perceive the building of the new high school as something that caters to, whether it's true or not, a more elite population. And I think DSA can continue to prevail and do well, even if we delay the building of a new high school. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, we'll skip Mr. Barron. If he comes later, we'll try to add him in. So thank you. So Lee Boardley, not Mr. Lee Boardley. Followed by Hillary Bruce. And lastly, and again, please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Ishani Gaston.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank all of our elected officials for the hard work that you do every day. I really appreciate it. I want to share several reasons that I hope that you will decide to renovate and not replace DSA. Julia has just spoken to the lack of community input. I know that your interest in involving the community is real. I would invite you to live into that value by providing real and substantive opportunities for community to speak. So that's my first reason. My second reason is that building a new school for the DSA program would be inequitable. DSA is the most popular and academically successful program in the system. It's unrealistic to believe that the community will ultimately step up and fund the renovation at all the other schools as well as the new DSA. We're behind in our renovations and repairs precisely because the community doesn't want to fund these kinds of less glamorous tasks. If you move forward with the new DSA, it's the other schools that will suffer. Even if the county did decide to fund all of the projects, the funds would have to be diverted from other important expenditures that support our families and children in Durham. Why would you provide the most privileged program in the system with a shiny new school when other schools and county needs are so pressing? One of the rationales, my third reason, is that one of the rationales for building a new school is that renovations inevitably reveal hidden expenses, and that would surely happen in this case. However, it's the cost of new construction that has proven to be dangerously unstable, exploding from 120 million to at least 240 million. This seems like a risky gamble. Number 4 is having a school in a visible, prominent location where citizens who support bonds can see a school in action and students and families can easily walk to the main bus terminal is a boon to our community. One of the best advertisements for DPS I can imagine is driving by and seeing students eating, playing, and talking together. Moving the school to a remote, inaccessible location would once again disadvantage families without transportation. The last thing I'll say is that I understand the pull to make a beautiful new building. A renovation is less exciting, but knowing many of you, I know you value the principles of community input, equity, and thrift. I hope you will decide to reconsider the decisions you've made and put us on the right path. Thank you.
Hello, I'm just here to share my story. First off, I want to say thank you for having meetings like this and being able to help support us. I am with Moms Rising. It's a program that supports low-wage moms, moms that are struggling, and just moms in general. I'm also with a program called the Union of Southern Service Workers, where we support low-wage workers. So I know how it is as a mom of 2. This is my son back here. I recently just had a daughter 2 weeks ago. So I'm fighting for them to be able to have free school meals because why not? Why should we have to pay? No matter what somebody makes, it shouldn't matter. Everybody should be able to eat for free. We make so much money in this world. I feel like that we should just all be able to eat for free. I have a lot of members in both organizations who have children and who are struggling, and a lot of them are in school. So it's not fair for somebody to have to go through that. If somebody gets to eat for free, I feel like everybody should get to eat for free. And I just want to be here to advocate for all the other moms who can't make it or who are out here and just to show my support.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Hillary Bruce. I'm with Farmer Food Share. We're a Durham-based nonprofit on a mission to provide fresh local food for all, and we are here to speak in support of expanded free meal access for DPS students. We believe that everyone has the right to access the food they need to enrich their bodies. I'm also the parent of a DPS 3rd grader and pre-K student, as well as a future DPS student. I know that expanded meal access would benefit all children in our community and help them grow and thrive. Thank you all so much for that.
Thank you. And that concludes our public comment. We're going to move to our next item on the agenda, which will be a presentation from DPS about the capital improvement plan. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's DPS student academic data. I apologize. I do not. I read all the names on the list that I have. Let's go with this presentation. I'll come back to you all, okay?
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to have both boards in one room and I have a really good conversation, and thank you to all these public comments. I wish we had a way to respond, but we're gonna go through these presentations. Hopefully some points that will address some of your concerns. But in the meantime, whenever we get opportunity, we'll be able to interject and try to provide some responses to some of the concerns as well. Today, I would like to introduce our Assistant Superintendent for Special Services, Dr. Pittman, who is going to share with us data from last academic year. Dr. Nicholas King was our deputy superintendent, is somewhere in Raleigh representing me in a meeting. That's why we have Dr. Pittman here taking over and be able to present our data. So Dr. Pittman.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mabenga, and good morning, board members and county commissioners. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you to share our accountability data. We do have a presentation that will be loaded that will assist us to go through. But before I begin, I would like to recognize some key members from our research and accountability team who are with us as well. Dr. Al Royster, our Executive Director of Research and Accountability, Nelson Searles, our Director of Data Integration, and Nathan Hester, Director of Accountability and State Assessments. They are really the ones who have pulled our information together in a concise manner, and I thank them for that. So let's begin. Let's get started on our first bit of information. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the components of our school accountability model. We're going to do a quick review of what it means and what are the variables that factor in, and then we want to share some of the results of this year. So if we'll go to the next slide. There we go. This is a pie chart that shows the breakdown of how the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction calculates school performance grades. So often you'll see a letter grade connected to a school, and these are the variables that go in. So performance, or how students do on the achievement of their state assessments, and then that has 80% of the formula. But then 20% of the formula that factors into their letter grade is around growth, how students have progressed through each year. On the next slide. So this is a very busy slide, but a quite helpful one if we break it down. We'll go quickly, but you can see the 80% with the bracket. That's the biggest part of what goes into a school letter grade. And you can see the blue header that says elementary and middle. So the assessments that go with that are English language arts, math, the end of grade math test, and our science test. For high schools, you see the companion courses, biology, English 2, and math 1. For high schools, in the orange box, there are a few additional variables or indicators that go into the formula that include the math course rigor, meaning how many students took math 3 at high school and got course credit for it. Also, our ACT scores, or the ACT work keys assessment for our CTE completers, and the cohort graduation rate. If you'll notice the yellow box, that is an annual assessment for English learners. So annually, every student is assessed on their language proficiency progress, and that is done in isolation, or a different assessment from those tests in the red. So all of that bundles into the 80%, and then 20% we get credit for growth. So on the next slide, let's talk about what it means with achievement versus growth. So achievement. Every spring in May, students take a test, the end of grade test, or in high school, they take end of course. It's a measure in time that day when the students take the test. The results of that assessment are factored in toward their achievement status. Growth. The 20% looks at, the state calculates in a year's worth of time, how much should a child grow? And schools, if they meet that metric, they get credit for that. And there is also an additional credit that they get for exceeding growth. So both of those together factor into how school letter grades occur. So let's go to the next slide. And let's talk about how we did. So let's go to the next slide. And there are a series of circle wheel pie charts, but this is our longitudinal data. And if you look on the far left and scanning to the right, this shows the number of schools that then were letter grade rated A, B, or C. And if you look, the green bar is highlighting the metrics that are under each of those circle wheels. And you see in 2016-17, we had 27 schools, and we're celebrating this year, 33 out of 52 schools have now increased into getting letter grades of A, B, or C. As a district, we have increased that percentage, and we're very proud about that. And I think that captures everything here. We are at 63.5% of our schools earning A, Bs, or Cs. On the next slide. This bar chart shows our overall grade level proficiency. So over the last 6 years, beginning in 16-17 until our most recent year, you can see that we have increased proficiency except for 1 year in there. And guess what that year was? Our remote learning year. There are a couple of years that are missing from this as well because the remote learning impacted the growth metrics, so they're not included on this slide. Next slide, please. Now we're going to break it down by content. We're going to talk about reading, then math, then science. So in grades 3 through 8, green is good. Green shows that in every grade level in reading, every grade level increased in reading proficiency this year. Our overall reading for the district at the bottom, you can see, is 45.3%. But our highest proficiency, we're celebrating our fourth grade. They increased to 49.9, which was the highest increase at 4.7 percentage points. On the next slide, let's take a peek at math. This slide again, third grade through eighth grade. Wow, some of our green really jumped. Most importantly, our math composite for the district aggregated across those grade levels is at 47.7, but we have increased at every grade level with a total composite score of 6.6 percentage point increases. Grade 3, we're celebrating. They have the highest at 56.4%, and the highest proficiency of improvement is, look at our fifth grade, 10.7 percentage points. They really worked hard and got some great results. Science on the next slide shows us science is only tested in grade 5 and grade 8. So our overall composite there, you can see on the bottom row, is at 64.9%. As a district overall, we've increased proficiency. Grade 5 went up by 4.3. Again, green is good. We slipped a little bit at eighth grade, but overall the district improved in science. On the next slide, we talk about high school. The high school has the 3 metrics: biology, English 2, and math. You can see again, green is good. We've increased proficiency in all of our end of course tests in high school, except English. Again, it had a little slight dip, but the highest proficiency at math 3 is at 48.7, and the increase at math 1 of 7.1 percentage points. On the next slide, now let's talk about English learner progress. ESSA, or English Every Student Succeed Act, requires us to assess every state to assess students annually on how their English language proficiency is improving. This is a specific test. We use the Access assessment that WIDA provides. And last year, this is really an interesting metric. If we look over the last 3 years, the jump from 9.8% to 25.4%, each child has an individual customized target that where you start with English proficiency, the state calculates every year what each child should do to improve. What's powerful about this, we are making gains with language proficiency. We jumped 8.6%. Yes, it's there. But that little green box on the right, we have now exceeded the language proficiency of the state. So we are on not only the right trajectory within our own children, but we have now surpassed by a smidge, 0.5 percentage points, the state language proficiency metric. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now we're going to talk a little bit about high school and the college and career readiness indicators. If we go to the next slide. So if you remember on the busy chart of 80%, these are the orange box indicators. There are 5 indicators that the state uses for college and career ready. 4-year cohort graduation rate, that says when a child enters 9th grade, the state wants to know that in 4 years that child is matriculating and graduating. Our cohort graduation rate was at 84.3%. This is the highest it has been, improved last year. Our math course rigor, or the numbers of students who took Math 3, completed Math 3 and earned a credit, 94.8%. Our ACT and ACT work keys are up, and the and finally we had an increase compared to the year before in each of our year-over-year metrics. So we're very proud of the work that's going on in high school as well. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now let's disaggregate it out and look to see how we're doing with our subgroups. So subgroups come in categories, but they also come through race, ethnicity. So let's go to the next slide. So all, meaning everyone in Durham Public Schools, where are we with our grade level proficiency? Again, we're at 47.9. What do we see again? Color, green is good. We have increased in every subgroup. You can see the subgroups that are highlighted there. Of particular interest, our American Indian subgroup really jumps out. We have, if you look at the count on the total tested, 49 students. So they increased by 20.2 percentage points. But you also can see the total tested in greater number as you go down that first column, and then the proficiency that compares with each of those. What's of interest here that I might want to lift up is for our subgroups. If you look, we rank second in the state for overall grade level proficiency. We rank second in the state for overall grade level proficiency, and we are only behind Chapel Hill Carborough. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is busy, but it's not hard. Let's look at it together. The grade levels are, the years are on the far left-hand column from 2016 through 2022 at 23. And we've pulled the subgroups racially and done a longitudinal study. So all of Durham children, students, are Asian subgroup, Black, Hispanic, multiracial, and white. Give you a minute to look at those. This is our cohort graduation rate. So how are our students graduating and how do we look? In 2022-23, our cohort graduation rate was the highest since 2016-17, excluding that 2021 school year, which is considered a bit of an outlier due to the COVID impact and remote learning. Two metrics I'd like to lift up: we've had the highest graduation rate for our Hispanic subgroup last year and our white students in 7 years. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You changed it and it looks the same. Going back, please. There are some other subgroup categories we wanted to lift up. So in addition to our race, ethnicity, we also have categories. So academically gifted, economically disadvantaged, limited English proficient students, and students with disabilities. Again, those cohort graduation rates, you can see, all of our subgroup have increased except our limited English proficient. They dropped a little bit. So we're graduating children, we're graduating our on time, and we're seeing some increases in that. All right, so let's go to the next slide. This is all around growth. How did our children grow? How did our students do from year to year? So we're going to look at growth over 5 years, and then we're going to take a peek at how do we compare to our peer districts across North Carolina. The next slide talks about growth. Again, our circle wheels. You can see that over the last 4 years, we have increased the number of schools that have met or exceeded growth. And over the past year, you'll look, we are at 88.2% of our schools met or exceeded growth. It's tremendous. And if we're going to continue the trajectory to make up gaps, this is going to be an important metric to track. The state, okay, I think we're good on this. Going to the next slide. The next slide, we took a peek at how might we look or compare to our neighboring districts or our peer districts. And as you can see, Durham is at the top. At 88.2%, we have this exceed the number of our neighboring districts that met or exceeded growth. Now, we also disaggregated, let's just take a peek at exceeded and let's just take a peek at met. And we see that Durham Public Schools has the second highest of exceeded, second only to Johnston County. And we look at the number of lowest not met, meaning those that did not meet the met or exceeded metric, and we are the lowest of all of our neighboring districts. There is much celebration there. So on to the next slide. Some school highlights. So we wanted to celebrate some of our schools really made tremendous gains last year. And if you'll allow us, if we go to the next slide, moving from a D status to a C status. And if you look on the left, there's the scale categories. So a D school would have been performing anywhere from 40 to 54%. So we have School for Creative Studies, Holt, Creekside, Glen, Sandy Ridge, Oak Grove, Merrickmore, and Carrington, who have now crested into the C category of performance. And on the next slide, those schools that moved from C to B, Mangum, Moorhead, and R.N. Harris Elementary. This is tremendous movement and work, and the school communities and leadership in those schools really have worked hard, and we wanted to celebrate those schools. So what do we say, what factored into contributing to the success? Let's go to the next slide. if I may, Dr. Stacy Stewart is here. She is our chief of schools. She has been tremendous in setting the course under Dr. Mabenga and the team that she has of area assistant superintendents who supervise and work with schools, working with schools contributing to this success. I must say, our students worked hard, and our teachers and our principals and our school leaders and our parents and our community all factored into this success. But leadership matters, and the tasks and the strategies that you see listed here really lift up the core work with intentionality. That there has been, our school improvement teams are no longer, let me say it this way, our school improvement teams are working hard, using our data, setting goals and adjusting instruction to make our children move forward. Support to schools, county commissioners, board, you're a part of this success. The support that you have provided to schools through fiscal resources, the human capital that we've been able to invest, the resources and materials have really made a difference, and we thank you for that. There is strong school level monitoring by our administrators. There is strong district support and district monitoring and providing feedback to our schools. And some of the key work that we did last year, we wanted to highlight here. I don't know if you know this, but Dr. Mabenga created a professional learning community with some high school math teachers and really worked hard around our high school math. We had a high school Saturday Academy for Math 1. An English learner, our families came on Saturdays to do some what we call the EL Prep Academy to help in preparation toward the access test. And then through additional dollars, we've created what are called interactive virtual conferencing classrooms where we can video and reach and spread across our district into schools on key areas in classroom work. On the right, you can see there are non-negotiables. Dr. Mabenga has created what we call district non-negotiables. What are our expectations on how we are to push in and support schools? There are school non-negotiables of expectations he's managed there, but all around design of wrapping around children, our schools, and our professional communities to support and nurture and move the needle forward. So those are the highlights of what we accomplished last year, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Mabenga to see if there are any questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pittman. To our board, I'm really excited about this work that has been done here. Anytime I have to pull data to look at how well are we doing compared to other urban districts, CMS, Guilford County, we are really doing really well if you pull data from other districts. So I don't want to break down those data, but those data is really public. You guys can pull them up to see how well we're doing compared to other urban districts. We still have a lot of work to do. I wish we could have been further along. Due to COVID, that has slowed down some of the process, but our trajectory is really looking really good. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to our chair. And Dr. Pittman, you can stay right there. We'll be ready to answer some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mabenga and Dr. Pittman, for that presentation, and to all of the educators and the families and the students who put the work in to get the results that we see today. It's a huge thank you to them as they're putting in more work today, right? Making sure that this school year students are still learning. I'm gonna open the floor for discussion. I'm gonna try to ask us to keep it brief because we have a full agenda today and want to make sure we get through everything. We'll start with Chair Howerton and then I'll go over to Commissioner Alum.
Is my mic on? It is now. So good morning, everybody. I just want to thank you, given COVID and what our children and parents and teachers have had to experience and undergo for the last, 2, almost 3 years, to see this kind of improvement. It really speaks volume for the work that our teachers and administrators have been doing. So I just want to say thank you. And it's great to get this kind of report and for the community to see what's happening. So I'm not gonna prolong the questions because we've got such a heavy agenda this morning, but I just wanted to extend my congratulations to all of our educators and administrators for the work they've done. And of course, the parents. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I want to add my ditto to Chair Howerton's compliments to our staff. Thank you so much for all of the work. And this in-depth data analysis. I just had two questions really around the one slide where we were going over the graduation rate and just wondering, have we looked into like that? I know it was a small drop, but that limited English proficiency where that we saw there was a little bit of a drop in the graduation rate, of what factors contributed to that drop?
Very good question. We have intentionally placed graduation, what we're calling graduation coaches, but they're English learner graduation coaches, that their core responsibility is to monitor and support their EL learners in high school. And you can imagine the complexities that some of our families, of course, all of our families across the community bring, but many of our children in high school are refugees, limited schooled, non-schooled, and managing all of the nuances of supporting our English learners. So we push in and really customize support child by child to try to mitigate that, but we are confident that that will continue to increase. But it is a complex situation to support those, but we do a lot of data disaggregation and we're working with our children.
And my second and last question was, how many A schools do we have and how do we rank statewide in our school grading?
I might want,
I have to do a little research on that.
We'll get back to it. David is pulling data there. I think before the
Thank
meeting, the end of the meeting today, we'll be able to come up with the answer. Say it again. Okay, we got 2 A schools. Yeah.
yeah, that would be on slide 7. Specifically, you can see the breakdown of 2. 2 is correct. On the far right.
Can provide, and this can be later, like just how do we rank statewide in that school grading?
You mean around the A rating or all of them?
Slides it was showing how we compared and how many C to B schools we had, D to C, but like comparing us statewide, how our schools are graded.
Thank you. I think that question, the way we may be able to pull that data, let's say we have 56 schools, we take 2, then denominator 6, and then compare with other districts as well. So that's data that we can be able to compile at some point, then we'll be able to email it to you.
Go to Commissioner Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. And I commend the progress that is being made, that we're moving in the right direction and especially recovering from COVID. But of course, we, as the data shows, we still have a lot of work to do. And of course, it is concerning when we see the disparities, especially with our Black children, our Hispanic children, multiracial, economically disadvantaged. There's still a really big gap. And so one of my questions is, when I look at the 3rd grade reading proficiency level at 39.3%, I'm really curious to see that number may be tracked over time. If we could get some trend data on that. You know, that's such a huge indicator of lifelong success is 3rd grade reading scores. It's really correlated with a lot of other factors, life factors. And, you know, I'm going back to when my kids were in school, we used to have programs like Reading Recovery. In middle school, there was another program, I think it was called AVID. Of course, we used to have a lot more support in our elementary schools for our teachers. We know what's happened with state funding. I just saw a data point yesterday that per capita, we spend the 2nd least amount of funding for public education in the entire United States. So I think I'm really interested in knowing what we specifically can do focusing on literacy. I know that's been a huge goal for Durham County with our Durham Pre-K program, is really focusing on what the foundation for literacy, reading, investing in our early childhood and families and building that strong foundation so that when our kids start elementary school, they are in a position to succeed. So one of my questions is finding out, are we doing where are we able to get data from screening with our kids coming into kindergarten to seeing have we had any success with our investment in Durham pre-K, setting our kids up for success. But, honestly, just hearing from you all, what I know you talked about the targeted additional support high need areas. And, is this an area that you all need help with? Is there, and again, we're not going to get it from the state, unfortunately. Is this something that we need to locally look at funding? Because if our kids cannot read, and it's just put stress on teachers later on, it gets harder and harder as they move through the system when you have more and more content heavy areas like science and social studies. So that's really my really big area of concern when I see the disparities. And then just when we see what's happening with our juveniles, some of the data can go back to kids just not experiencing success in school, and then how that impacts their behavior and things like that. So I'll stop there. I know it's not something you can answer now, but I would, as we move into the budget soon, would love to hear more about that.
Thank you. Well noted. Briefly, I think probably 5 or 6 years ago, working with Linda Chappelle office, we've been able to track data for kindergarten that were coming to DPS. We knew they were coming pretty much less than 50% of them, they were ready for pre-K. That's an investment that the county has been really helping with. And that's the reason why we're also building, remodeling some of these elementary schools so we can expand capacity with our pre-K. So when it comes to programs that we have in school to be able to address literacy, that's a conversation that we're going to have at some points. But let's keep in mind, 3 years of COVID did not help. When you pull this data that we have, you pull data from other places, you're all going to see that they pretty much correlate because of the impact of COVID. That's not an excuse. We have a lot of work to do. And thank you to Commissioner Jacobs. And definitely we'll be coming to you, having those conversations when the budget comes.
All right, Commissioner Carter.
Yes, thanks so much for this presentation. And I want to really also thank you for being one of the most accountable elected bodies to the people by way of data transparency and also by way of just the number of measures that public schools have to undergo, and just this presentation, so much data. No one is measured more than public schools are across this country, and you're very accountable, and for that we're all very grateful. Do you all ever feel like you're just working on the same things that you've been working on for like 20 years, and there's still the achievement gap based on race and class, and yet there's a lot of improvement happening every single year? We have very good growth data every year, so improvements happening. I think it's amazing that Durham Public Schools ranks second in the state in overall grade level proficiency behind Chapel Hill Carborough. Did I get that right? I mean,
Did I say that right? Oh, Nelson is.
No, that was another. There were 2 data points. One was, I think, we also 88% met or exceeded growth, top in the top
peer.
But then there was I wrote down, we ranked second in the state in overall grade level proficiency behind Chapel Hill Carborough.
So I'm getting maybe I didn't get that right.
Maybe I wrote it down wrong.
But why don't we follow up and
All
get that
right.
right for you?
Because that would have been an incredible data point if it were indeed true. But there was universal improvement in proficiency.
Yes. And if I may, the point Dr. Mabenga made, if you think about those 3rd graders where they started school in kindergarten COVID. Remote. Right. I mean, if we think about going backward mapping in the years of 1920, 2021, the reason growth is so powerful is we're making up those losses, and we've restored ourselves in some areas back to pre-pandemic. We're close in other areas, but it really is tremendous catch up around the impact that not just Durham Public Schools, but across the country, but North Carolina has been managing.
Yeah, let me just clarify this data.
Thank you.
When we said the chart that we had 88.2% growth, that was based on the selected school district in the surrounding area. And we're able also to pull some district like a Guilford County. So that's what we're referring to. I think anytime our staff have to brag about data, how we stand compared to other district in proficiency, if you break down our data, our white students are number 2 in the state.
Maybe that was.
Our white students
you.
are
It wasn't said
ranked
that
number
way, but-
2 in the states. That's the data that we've been bragging about.
Thank you.
Well, and that also leads me to want to say, you mentioned we have 2A schools, but in my opinion, we have many, many, many more A schools than 2A schools. When you think about the value and the promise of public education and the experiences that our children are having at these schools, and especially with the Grow Together and all of the rich electives now and the language and all, it's just these, yes, you're highly accountable based on metrics, but these are data points. And it's also remarkable how they can change. In 2007, Dr. Denlinger was a superintendent, and her thing was keep the main thing, and the main thing was 3rd grade reading. And her goal was by 2007, 95% of all 3rd graders in Durham Public Schools would be proficient in reading, and they were. So that was in 2007. 95% of all 3rd graders were proficient in reading. And then the next year or two, they renormed the tests, and then suddenly, suddenly those same 4th graders now are no longer proficient because of renorming of the test. So there's just so many complications about the data that I want us to also keep in mind as we track the data, with great interest, because we do need to be sure we're seeing the gaps and the disparities. But we also remember that data schmata sometimes, that there's so much more to the schools than just the numbers. So thank you.
I'm gonna add one comment and then I'll go over to Ms. Lewis. We often talk about holding both and when we look at this data and this and school experience and this. And I also just want to comment, the data is even more, there's even more, and it's disaggregated even more on our website. So if you want to see each school, you want to see it broken down by race and gender, all of that is broken down even more on our website. So there's a lot of ways to crisscross that data. Ms. Lewis, and then I'm gonna move us to our next item.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for reminding about 2007 renorming of the test and everything, data schmata. I agree with that. I would say too, and ask our administration, how many schools of growth did we have? Like, for sure, we wouldn't know how many A schools, but we know that metric and determining what an A school is not truly what our students represent anywhere. And really, I want to look at what is it growth? How many schools have we had growth? We can just share that data while we're talking about data schmata.
It's on slide 21. We have 51 schools and 45 met or exceeded growth. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Because out of that 55, I think 2 have different metrics, right?
We pulled out
okay.
Thank you for that sophisticated question. Yes,
Sorry.
but we've pulled out the alternative schools and yes.
All right, thank y'all so much for this presentation. Our school board has seen it earlier this year, so we're relatively quiet because we've seen this presentation, but really proud of the work that our schools have done. I'm gonna move us to our next item, which is DPS Capital Improvement Plan update. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Valladares, you wanna make a comment while we switch to the next?
Yeah,
presentation?
just a comment and reflection, because this is a long process. I want to commend Dr. Mubenga's leadership. If you will remember years ago, the ESL department was in charge of not only access testing, performance learning center, gauging new incoming students and assigning them to the schools, and registration, and high school dropout prevention specialists, and they also had interpretation. I do think that over the years, Dr. Mubenga's leadership has been strategic and has been really receptive to community input about making sure that the ESL department focuses on academic achievement, which is what they do best. And the interpretation, triaging in terms of this large system became the Multilingual Resource Center, and that change was in 2019. So you will see that time and time again, now we have a chief of schools. That is a new position as well with Dr. Stewart, and that wasn't something that we had all along. So there's a lot about leadership decisions, reorganizing, restructuring a system to better address the needs of community. And that needs to be also lifted up, because it is not a surprise, that through the pandemic, we go from 9.6 to 16.9 to 25%. And we're hoping to lift that up. I mean, no demographic in DPS should be at a quarter of what their potential is. And we know our students are bright. Language is not a barrier. We have dual language immersion programs. We have, IB, the International Baccalaureate program. We have a lot of programs that really bring this message that languages are a strength, they're an asset, and they're not a liability. And so I really appreciate your support in terms of supporting the efforts of MRC, in terms of supporting the efforts that we're doing in our district to make sure that no child that every child succeeds, right? Every student succeeds. The last thing I will say is that when it comes to testing, that is also very tricky. Access testing is a very tricky thing. It needs to be done right. And I've visited some schools, shout out to School for Creative Studies, walking in and seeing the ways that principals address how testing happens. Principal Clay was in the middle of testing, and I was talking to her about something else, but it was amazing to kind of see the level at which our administrators are also focusing on making sure testing conditions, requirements and all that are met. So I just wanted to just shout out our leadership and just let you know, these are all intentional steps in terms of leadership, restructuring, reorganizing, creating new departments, and doing the things that need to be done to bring us to where we are today and where we're going to go and where we're headed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon said, could you speak to, there were some mamas that came to speak that we haven't had a chance to get to their public comment. Can we reserve time to return to them?
So my goal is to have some time at the end of the meeting, but we got to keep moving so we can make sure we come back around for if another person comes, Mr. Barron, as well as the additional comments that came. All right, Mr. Johnson, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Morning, Chair. I'm Chair Howerton and the Board of County Commissioners, as well as the Board of Education. Thank you for having us and giving us the opportunity to present this data and information. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here you see outcomes, when it comes to the Department of Durham Public School Construction and Capital Planning. Our outcomes are to gain understanding of the capital program and the status update on capital improvement for 2022 bond. Next slide, please. What is the process of funds project? Identify the requirements, identify the funds where, how we pay for it, prioritize the requirements and allocate the funds. Next slide, please. Capital renewal, and I'm gonna switch to this because my eyes are not that good. Next, we have capital plan. What is capital renewal? A requirement that is existing to the building that will either repair or complete replacement. For what are examples? Electric, HVAC, roof, flooring, fire alarm, security alarms. That's what we deal with when we are talking about capital renewal. When it comes to capital improvement, a requirement not existing to the building that may aid in a specific facility mission, but does not currently exist. What examples? Air conditioning, separate cafeteria, classroom space, additional playground, separate gym. Next slide, please. Here's just a rundown of some of our capital requirement database and how we've spent monies. If you look back 2019, there was 200 million for capital renewal, 500 million for capital improvements. That's a total of $700 million. And that was back in 2019. If I had to give an accurate update today, that's probably closely to 1.2 million of capital renewal projects that we have to complete. And that's based on a budget, a local budget of 6 million and 2 million from lottery that we have to do to complete that. In 2023, we have commissioned a facility condition assessment. And what that assessment would do is evaluate the entire district and make sure that we prioritize those jobs that need to get done. We've also developed a committee within Durham Public Schools where we have a committee of principals and other staff members where we will prioritize what jobs and renewal projects that we have to do based on the need from that facility assessment. It will take us about 6 months to complete that facility assessment. We expect it to be done around the summer, but in the meantime, we're going to use the 2019 project assessment, which is not as clear as this one will be. And we will facilitate and we will come up with a plan that we will present at a later time to both boards as far as what we would do for the next upcoming year of 24-25. Next slide, please. As you can see, this was the prioritized order for the 2020 capital improvement program. And as you can see, I'll give you a chance to kind of look at it. You can see the schools that and how they were prioritized and a dollar amount that is attributed to that. The total come to about $940 million to complete all projects. You look at Northern High School replacement, Lion Farms, which we've completed both, School of the Arts, Murray Massenburg, Jordan Glenn. You see the order that was prioritized back then. And of course, we'd had to make some adjustments based on cost, based on supply chain, and just based on inflation. Next slide, please. When you look at the 22 capital improvement plan, you look at Moorhead as being the top one, and you look at what it will be once renovation is done. You see the same thing for Glenn, Hope, Club, Bethesda, and Mangum. You see the school to the left is the current school, and to the right will be, once updated, what those schools will look like. Next slide, please. Here are schools that either have been completed or will be in the process of starting the process. You look at Lions Farm, that's the new school. Murray Bassenberg is ongoing, and we hope to open that school in August of 2024. Also, you see Northern High School, as well as Durham School of the Arts. Next slide, please. Where's the funding going? Capital Renewal Improvement Subcommittee that I talked about a little earlier. That committee helps us to designate what projects that we will complete. Of course, I talked about the facility assessment as well, and then we'll prioritize the requirements. Here you see monies that are spent, extra money, 37 million, what those monies were spent for: HVAC, indoor air quality, outdoor learning, water fountains. You see lobs of 10 million that was given in 2020. I think we have about 250,000 of that left. We did life safety, HVAC, safety requirements, and miscellaneous structural items as well. And then you see the 6 million local that I talked about earlier. That's capital renewal, capital improvement, 2 million for lottery, and that's for roof and asphalt. And again, we're having to spend $8 million on 55, 56 schools, and things come up every day. So we have to budget very wisely and have conversations about how to prioritize these projects in order to make sure our schools are updated and appropriate for our staff and our students. And next you have a GOBS of 513. Of course, that's tied to new construction of a total of 568 million. Next slide, please. This is just an example of our capital improvement spending, and I will give you a chance to kind of look at that. It just shows you new construction, HVAC, how we're spending the money and trying to be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. Next slide, please. Here's just some examples of why we're dealing with the increases. You talk about material commodities, you talk about labor, you talk about freight, supply chain, you talk about wars and how they impact increase in prices. This is what we're dealing with on a daily basis in all areas. Next slide, please. Here you have the 2022 program update, just to give you some feedback. Murray Massenburg, of course, new construction, 800 student elementary school. Back in 2022, we estimated at 72 million. Currently, we anticipate to come in around $90 million. During School of the Arts, when we originally had that conversation, it was 133 million. Now we're upward of 240 million. Glenn Elementary anticipated 55 million, could be 68. Moorhead 20, could be 25. Construction services, and that's just help us get through the process of building these schools and updating these schools. But all of these, and I gave you a handout. Charlotte Meck just did a $2.5 billion bond. That's just a brief update of what they're dealing with. When you look at a comprehensive high school in those numbers, you're looking at upward of 200 million that they're having to deal with. And part of the 2.5 billion, they expected to do more projects. Now they're going to have to go back and look at what they're going to have to decrease, because again, the cost of everything is going up. So to pay 200 million for a traditional high school that 5 years ago you could do for under 100 million, just shows you the rapid increase of prices that we're having to deal with. Next slide, please. Durham School was proposed. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one, I'm sorry. Proposed 2020 bond schedule. As you can see, Lions Farm opening 2022, the New Northern opening 2023, Murray Massenburg expect to open in 24. And the following is what we will do within the next couple of months. New school, Durham School Art bid phase will begin in March of 24. Elementary bid phase in May of 24. Durham School of the Arts to be completed in June of 26 based on the current schedule. That could change some, just depends on supply chain and everything else in labor. Bond phase number 1 for school projects, August of 2026. Next slide, please. We've been fortunate enough to have some of our schools recognized in national publications. You see a 2023 Design Merit Awards, and you also see an article was written about the new design that we have forthcoming. Next slide, please. Questions. And I have Ms. Wilma Jordan, who is our Director of Construction, here with me as well. And she will be able to help us address any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Questions? I'll start with Chair Howerton, and we'll go to Commissioner Jacobs.
Just, thought I did. Okay, it's on now. Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. And just at one time we were seeing being able to use all the funding up appropriately for the bonds. Now we are running going past what we need. Is that I'm understanding you?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it more of the product? Is it manpower? Which one is increasing the fastest? All of the above.
If I had to pick and choose, we're looking at the increase of materials. There is the shortage of labor and having to compensate individuals to potentially attract labor. It is delays in getting the materials, making substitutions. It's across the market.
No, it's all across the market. Yeah. Thank you.
And it doesn't help that we're in competition with other nearby districts. Guilford passed a 1.7, I think, in 2022, and with Charlotte passing a 2.5 million bond. Billion, sorry. We're in competition with them as well as far as contracts and everything else.
Okay. Wow, thanks.
Thank you so much for this update. And I really appreciate the way that, you know, our staffs are working together now. But let's remember, this is, we've made a lot of progress in terms of the collaboration and the cooperation between all of our, you know, staff working together. I think you know, a lot of important issues are raised by this escalation. And I think we really need to understand, you know, we've heard from residents raise these issues, but I think we all need to understand, how does this impact the plans that we, you know, that we went out for the bond saying this is what the bond money is going to be used for. We actually had to specifically say what the money was going to go to certain schools. That was part of the process of the transparency around it. So we do need to get a grasp on what does this mean for the plans and the schedule and all of the schools that we had hoped that we were going to be able to serve. So I would like to understand that. And also, I would also like to understand how this does affect the decision-making around DSA, because I assume that part of the decision about build a new school was when staff looked at the numbers and said, well, it's going to be a lot more expensive to renovate the current site and that it was going to be more cost effective to build new. And just wondering how does that, does that mean that renovating also goes up now too, as well? So I think it would be helpful. I know we can't address this now. I had already spoken to the county manager about this, about our staff getting together very quickly, because we know that time is money, and that impacts everything. And you have a schedule for DSA. But I think it's important that we do get some answers to the questions that have been raised by the community. And, if we could have some type of process, I'll leave it up to Dr. Mbanga and County Manager Sowell what they recommend, but for a way to some of the questions that have been asked to be quickly evaluated and some response for both of our boards, but also for the community. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up about the renovation, current renovation versus new, back when I mentioned 133 million, we also did an evaluation of what it would cost to renovate, and we were at 120. And if we were going to build a new school for 130 versus renovating for 120, it just made sense to build a brand new school. So we did look at that. And if we had to compare apples to apples now, based on the $240 million price tag today, if we had to do a full renovation, it would probably be upward of 300 million if we look at that from apples to apples perspective.
Dr. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Also, when we have to renovate DSA, it's gonna take us probably a good 7 years, because we gotta be able to work around where students are. So that's another topic there. Let me just address the main issue about bond. When we went to voters, the bond was $423 million. We're supposed to address to build 3 new schools and then renovate 5 other schools. And I just want to say this: we respect the wish of all our voters, our citizens, but we really want to be transparent. We're going to bring a proposal to our board eventually, then bring it to our county commissions as well, and myself and Dr. Sowell working together. We got to a point where we have to really proceed with DSA. If we don't do it, we're not going to have enough time to open in the 26 to 27. I met with community leaders this week for DSA conversation. We don't want to get to a point where the hiccup that we had with Northern High School. The longer we prolong this, we're not going to be able to open our DSA on time. So what was the bond project for the $423 million? It was for us to be able to address Mary Masselberg. It was for us to be able to build DSA. I think Lion Farm was pretty much the other part of our bond that we had in 96, but we had to use some of the funds as well. Now we're getting to the point where if the remaining money, if we address DSA, the remaining money is going to go for Glen Elementary School, which is ready. If we have to pull off from that contract, we're going to lose $1 million. So Glen is going to be addressed. And then once we address DSA Glen, we are only going to have enough money to be able to tackle one more school, which is going to be Moorhead. And with Moorhead, we still short probably a good between $7 or $10 million. That's the conversation that we're going to have. We're going to bring it to county manager. We're going to bring it to our board and then see how we can proceed. I think we've been able to make some step forward. Let's say for Glen Elementary School, the contractors already bought materials that need to be built. If we have to pull off, we're going to lose money there. And that's not something that we would like to do. So instead of addressing the 8th project, it may only go far enough for 4 projects. That's why we need to have those conversations as quickly as possible. I heard somebody made a comment here. We just want to be fully transparent. If we're all gonna agree, say, this is how far you guys have been gone, we don't need you to go back 4 projects, then the other 4 projects, we're gonna come to our board, our citizens, say that's something that we may be able to address for the following bond. I think the quicker we can have those conversations, I think it's gonna help us to be able to tackle those projects.
Follow up, let me follow up on that for just a second about the bond. And the manager may need to answer this. If we don't have enough funds, right, with this bond that we just passed, how long would it take before we could even go out for another bond?
So I think, and I'm gonna look at our budget staff, I think we were looking at 2026 as the next. Mhm.
David Adie's Assistant Director of Budget. I'm channeling my inner Keith Lane for those of you that know him. Yes, 2026 is what's currently in the CIP based on traditional spending patterns. That's also indicating that there's 423 million. It's quite a bit to get going and spent. So you don't want to issue money before you really are going to be able to spend it. They mentioned all the construction challenges that are ongoing right now to be able to even get the companies to build schools of this size. So in short, 2026. And then one other piece, the GeoBond, and I will confirm with DCM Hager with hopefully a head nod that the GeoBond's issuances are, while they may mention some specific target schools, they're more broadly noted for education in general. Because when you're doing this 2 years ago, we're projecting costs, there was no way to guess that prices on schools were going to go nearly double. So while we do clearly understand the need of 7 or 8 schools from the budget office perspective, we also know that sometimes that's not what happens 2 years later when the world changes a little bit. I got a head nod.
Thank you.
And can I just ask this one question? Durham School of the Arts, can you talk about how we got to that being one of the priorities in this CIP? And this might even this predates you maybe, Mr. Johnson, but we did do a.
He's not, but Ms. Jordan.
I'm also happy to give a little bit of history.
It predates her as well.
Okay, so I believe it's 2019 when we had the Cummings report that they assessed all of our schools. Mr. Palmer is gonna come up, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. And DSA was a high priority because of the condition of the school. It is a 100-year-old beautiful building, but it also means there's a lot of stuff behind those walls that needs to be fixed. And I'm gonna give it to you so you can be more correct than I am, Mr. Palmer.
Chair Umstead, good morning again. I wouldn't say more correct. I might build off of your comments. DSA is, of course, an important historical site. We all recognize that. One of its main attributes is its centrality. It's in the heart of our community, right? That is, for many of us, why it's iconic, but it's also an intense safety and logistical challenge as well. We have 68 doors. We have 68 stairwells. We have 68 ramps to get in and out. So for ADA compliance, for safety and security of our students, the board and the commissioners may remember instances where members of the community were walking into DSA due to a variety of reasons. Moreover, there are over 1,000 car riders daily at DSA. If you're in downtown Durham between 8 and 9 o'clock, you know what that looks like. DSA on a site can hold 20 of those cars, which means the other 980 are spilling along Duke, Main Street, across 147, and into the core of Durham during its peak central business hours. And so not only from a logistical and safety consideration, we also ran a facility conditions assessment to evaluate, we call it an FCI, which is to say at some point, are you putting more money into renovating a school than it is worth? That's one of the things that we were really looking at with DSA. And I think it was alluded to in this meeting that a renovation at minimum would be 7 years, but the fiscal tab would effectively be a blank check. We could not know what we were committing ourselves to. This is a campus that, of course, is the site of integration in Durham, and importantly so. It has been built upon and built upon. It now has 7 buildings started as one. And so if you think of the Rome Coliseum, when it builds upon itself, we really don't know what we would find as we go into that. And that was part of the decision at that time.
Let me add just one more thing. I hear this conversation quite often when it comes to equity, while we're spending too much money on DSA. DSA is a magnet school that serves all our students. So we have students coming from west, east, north, south. They go to DSA, they go through the lottery process. We're serving all our students. If you're looking at percentage of minority at DSA, it's really high. So equity to me is not an issue because it's a magnet school that's gonna serve all our students.
And there's transportation provided, right? Still, I mean, that was
Yes,
always
yeah.
a reason the board continued to spend a lot of money on transportation was for equity reasons.
That's correct.
And that's still a priority.
Yes, ma'am.
So highlighting that in the other two schools that we're focusing on are a lot of that condition survey as well as thinking about where growth is in the county. So I know we had a longer list and that list is shortened, but I kind of want to make sure we were able to share why we picked some of the schools that we did. Commissioner Alum.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to go back to the discussion of bonds. And sorry, I know David already went and sat down. I saw Claudia also was standing up to make a comment, but I think one thing I want to highlight and I want to ask is where's staff with discussing like county and school board staff of getting us onto a regular bond schedule and just having that laid out so we know, because the last bond before this 2022 one was 2016 and Heidi confirmed for me the one before that was 2007. And I feel like we need to have a schedule because we can't just have this wishy-washy, oh, well, now we'll have one, or maybe it'll be 6 years. But
That's something that you all will hear about at our board retreat on Monday.
wonderful.
And can I just echo that the slide that showed the CIP from northern being completed all the way down, we only had 23 sites on there. We have 55, 56 sites within the county. And I'm tasked to use $8 million to keep those schools running on a daily basis, where we could have 250,000 HVAC unit that go out tomorrow. And when we look at that 6 million and try to make sure we touch every school, you know, it's important that we do a good job and be very fiscal when fiscally responsible, because we got to touch every school every year. We have schools that haven't had paint in a number of years that we're trying to develop a schedule to get those things done. I have to do that within that $8 million, which seems like a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money when you're talking about rising costs, supply chain. So we're having to do or be very creative to make sure that we touch in all schools, not just schools that are affected by the bond as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Carter.
I just quickly want to, first of all, say thanks to the great speakers that came today with their very thoughtful and insightful comments. Really has provoked a lot of thought, I'm sure, among all of us. One thing in response to a couple of things that they said, and I think it's important that we say today, is that we have to be sure we keep up with the capital needs of all of our schools. We're not going to divert funding away from schools and not take care of those capital needs. We will have another bond or come up with the funding, you know, locally, the financing mechanism locally, because that's what we do in Durham, right? We're not going to neglect the elementary schools that are on the list. We're not going to do that. And I wanted to also ask a question about the site of the new the proposed new DSA location. I mean, it's been mentioned a couple of times that it's inaccessible, that it's remote. I don't really see it that way, but just wondering, you know, is it on a bus line? It's right off of North Duke Street. It's not that far from DSA, actually. A little north, couple miles north.
In many ways, logistically and from an access framework, the new site is ideal in the sense that, as Dr. Mbenga pointed out, DSA is a district-wide school. Entering into the urban core during peak business hours in the morning currently is a major logistical challenge. It takes us 30 school buses to do that. A third of our fleet is dedicated just to that daily at the middle school tier in the middle. The new site is on the Ellerby Creek Trail. So if you were to head left out of the door, you'll go towards Maine on the mountains, the East Coast Greenway. And if you turn right, you'll head towards Florida, hopefully downtown Durham in between. It is approximately 1 mile off of the I-85 corridor. which means that for all of the students in the county that have to get to that site via school bus especially, will be able to do so. We also have an ongoing partnership with Go Durham and the Go Triangle in regards to the Youth Go Pass. We have high participation rates. We're trying to leverage every asset we can between the yellow school bus, the city bus, walking, biking, carpooling, and driving when we have to. The reality is we are in modern Durham, which, as we can see out the windows, is going through its own renovation and revitalization. That also means that it is extraordinarily competitive to find any site that's going to be accessible for the values of our community. The Duke Homestead site that the new DSA has proposed for provides access. We have considered multimodal accessibility. And again, we're but a mile from the downtown core, but yet still able to offer a state-of-the-art 21st century learning environment at the same time on a historic site of its own.
Yeah, thank you for that. And at some point, I think it would be good to hear from the Board of Education about what sorts of thoughts you are having around the use of the current site for DSA. I know from articles I've read that educational purposes seems to be top priority. And you know, how that site, what your vision for that site might look like, and how it would still include a lot of, like, you know, urban vibrancy and a lot of, you know, life, blood, heartbeat of the city, you know, for the whatever students are there. So yeah, that'd be important to know in the future, I think, too, as, you know, we all grapple with what you know, what can we do here? You know, do we follow, you know, we want to follow your lead and the leads of our staffs working together to tell us how can we manage the amount of money we have in this bond and get everything done.
We certainly look forward to having conversations with you all about what we can do on that property, right? We know whatever happens will require some renovations and will cost some money. So we look forward to having those conversations. But I do think it was stated in the article, and we've talked about wanting to keep some educational use to that property, as well as thinking about what else can happen there. Board members, any questions or comments from you all? Ms. Valladares?
Just a
And then
quick
I'ma
comment,
close this out so we can-
that I believe it was 2022, was it 2022 when we had a discussion around the Duke Homestead, and also,
It
we
was October 2021, actually.
October 2021. Yes. And so, you know, that meeting that we had in October 2021, we talked about a lot of the details that were shared today, about the Duke Homestead and why this previous iteration of this board, that includes some of us, considered all that was on the table at that time. There's also just an article that is out that is a decade old, that just talked about the fact that site has already, there was a plan even a decade ago, and Dr. Mubenga, you might, you know, our administration might be able to talk a little bit more about that, but that site was already purposed for a school. And so these conversations are not new, and I understand, you know, in terms of communication and the community kind of learning about these things, it may seem like this is just, you know, springing up out of nowhere. But there have been conversations, and at least that site was designated for a school. I do have, you know, considerations around EQUA and environmental things that we talked about in that meeting in October 2021, where, you know, we committed whoever is going to be building at that time to make sure that there's no damage to our to Ellerby Creek watershed, because we're environmental stewards as well. And so there's a lot of rich discussion. I just urge our community to check out that meeting on October 2021. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna move us to our next item. Thank you all. Thank you so much. The next one is DPS Student Nutrition Services about community eligibility provision schools.
Thank you again, Chair Umstead. Go to the slide presentation, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Community values and visions. Every Durham public school student should have access to delicious, nutritious school meals free of charge, regardless of family status or income. DPS Board of Education, Durham County Commissioners, teachers, families, and student superintendent and student advisory council. The value of free meals. Students at school with no cost have better test scores, concentration, comprehension, memory, participation, and attendance. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Funding. There are two approaches to school meals for all in Durham. Next slide, please. School meals for all in Durham. You have two different pathways that we can look at. One is, of course, CEP that has been discussed several times this morning. And the other one is universal meals. And what we'll do is give you a comparison of both. Next slide, please. First, community eligibility provision, CEP. Next slide, please. What is CEP? All students, regardless of income, a school assignment, or geography, have access to breakfast and lunch free of charge while at school. No paperwork related to income is collected by the school. No school meal debt for families and schools. And DPS is eligible with 46% IS based on 22-23 data. Next slide, please. This is just a sampling, and I heard doing one comment earlier about Title I funds. Let me just talk about that a little bit. And the speaker was absolutely correct when they say we don't lose funding as a county when it comes to CEP and Title I. What it does is, and you can see this, sometimes schools lose positions. If you're in a school that, just for example, if you got $150,000 last year, with the implementation of CEP, there is a possibility that you can go down to $120,000, which could result in a loss of positions. So when the speaker talked about not losing funds, you don't lose funds as a district, but individual schools could lose funds just depending on the formula that creates that. But on the other side of that, schools could also gain positions as well. So it's give and take on both sides. You can see some of the numbers here. FCC Spalding, for example, $1,000. Star is CEP school already. $1,000. They lost one position because of that. So that's what I mean.
You explain why?
Can I explain? It's because of the formula that is created through CEP. And Mr. Palmer might be able to go a little bit more in depth in that. Okay. Let me refer to Dr. Stewart.
Mr. Palmer, you can if you like. Okay, so basically, as Mr. Johnson, good morning.
Good morning.
Please know the chief of schools who spoke in September is not serving as a barrier to providing universal lunch for all these children of DPS. Please know that. And I would like to preface, since I have this moment, we need to feed the children in order to reach the children so we can teach the children.
Go ahead.
So we are all on the same team. Can I get an amen?
Amen. Amen.
All right. So with that, thank you. So with that, it just says that based on the percentage of students who are identified as recipients of low socioeconomic status, with CEP, they use direct certification. All those students, families who are in the system receiving support through SNAP and other governmental assistance, there is a number and a percentage that's assigned to schools. If we go district-wide CEP, all of the schools will have a number of low-income students identified, as well as a percentage. When you put all of them together, currently in Durham Public Schools, schools that are at 40% or higher of low socioeconomic, we identify them to receive Title I funds. Okay, start there. If we choose to move into CEP district-wide, there's an implication that more schools would qualify to be Title I, right? So with that, as a district currently, If schools are at 40% or higher, we are serving them. The state gives us an allotment. With that allotment, there are several layers that we have to go through in terms of requirements that the feds has of us. 1% has to be set aside for parent involvement, so on and so forth. So then we have the money that's remaining to divide and share within Title I schools. So the CEP conversation with Title I is simply those percentages that are identified through direct certification become a part of consideration for Title I. And I would just say this, I am going to read directly from the Food and Nutrition Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture document that was printed, dated April 27, 2015. You all can go and do your research. Google is my friend. There is a paragraph, and I just want to read one sentence. It says, participation in CEP is a local decision and one that requires careful consideration of many factors. And so that conversation back in September was based on many factors, not just one. For some LEAs, the decision process whether to elect CEP takes into account CEP's potential impact on the implementation of their Title I program. And as Dr. Johnson said, and it is noted here, there's a possibility that it impacts schools' funding sources. So with that, if you are accustomed to receiving funding at a certain level, it may be impacted. So when you have those numbers in red, -1 position or -0.5 position, then we have to make up for that if we want to continue to receive the gains as noted in the presentation by Dr. Pittman. We want our students to continue to grow. We need proficient students. We need dollars to supplement in areas of deficiency. So CEP's potential impact on the implementation of their Title I program, including the distribution of Title I funds to schools within an LEA. Thank you for this opportunity to clear that up.
So, thank you. Thank you so much for that explanation. You know, I guess I feel like the parent that was here a few minutes ago. I raised 3 boys, 6'4", 6'5" guys, and every time they walk in the house, it's like, there's nothing here to eat, and I haven't eaten all day. So I would like to know, I hear what the concerns are, but I'd like to hear, how do we make it happen? That would be my question, is how do we make it happen?
I think that's a part of the presentation.
Yeah,
as
let
to
me
all.
finish and then we'll take any questions that you might have,
Okay.
with all due respect, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. Next, we'll talk about universal meals by county funding. Next slide, please. If Durham County Department Board of Education were to cover all costs for paid student meals, what does that mean? Meaning that we would pick up all costs as it relates to every student within the county eating. Next slide, please. Value of universal meals. The stigma of school meals continue because DPS must continue to collect free and reduce price lunch paperwork annually. Hundreds of hours of meal procurement, planning, preparation, time saved per family per year. DPS Nutrition Services misses out on a minimum of 1.1 million in additional revenue through increased reimbursements, making the work job quality, food quality, cultural competency of meals, expanded services more challenging. Next is all families will have access to school meals free of charge and growing together implementation for 24-25. Next slide, please. And next, we're going to provide, next slide, please, a comparison. I'm going to bring back our Executive Director, Matthew Palmer, to finish his last slide.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We have been asked to bring a bottom line conversation to the table. What are our options and what do those options cost us? On the left, we have the gains that are associated with financial support from the federal government from the Community Eligibility Provisions Program. We would save on much of the infrastructure discussed just previously. So our families would not have to fill out free and reduced lunch applications. That is a major burden for families and our administration. Director Keaton is here today to answer any questions about the processing that is involved and the infrastructure that it costs us. So we would save on those costs. We would also generate additional revenue through the USDA program. So in the aggregate, if we were to go for CEP, we would save or gain $1.5 million annually, and that would feed all children with no paperwork required. Were the county and the board to pick up the cost of paying for all children to eat from local, we would not save on that infrastructure, in part because families would still have to submit the paperwork to receive free and reduced lunch eligibility at non-CEP schools. Right now, we're about half and half. In addition, the federal supplements that would roll in, the 1.1 million, would not be received by DPS either. So we would still have to pay those costs, and we would not have the federal reimbursement from the USDA. In addition, and we've talked about blank checks earlier, here is what we must be candid about. If today every family that is on free and reduced lunch applications continued to submit the paperwork, it would cost us $3 million. If the board and the county were to say no one has to submit paperwork, it could go up to $12 million annually. So I'm trying to be very clear-eyed. Again, our role in planning is to lay it down so you can play it out. But hopefully this data is helpful, and our team is here to answer any questions about the nutrition data.
Before you get started, let me explain something that Mr. Palmer said. When he said that 1.5 is 1.1 from federal, and the other 363,000, that is unpaid lunch balances that Durham Public School has to pay every year when that occurs.
The next slide does bring this all together. If you could go to the next slide.
Next slide, please. That's just a compilation of what we just said.
Thank you all so much for bringing this presentation. And I want to preface this again by, we all want to feed our children. I think we're trying to figure out one of the questions I asked in September is, what's the best way to do that so that we can maximize the dollars that are getting spent on children, right? And so figuring out how we do that with a combination of federal funds, local funds, et cetera, is why we want to have this conversation today, figuring out the best way to maximize our dollars. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Mabenga for a couple of comments.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Before we go to questions, let me just, we don't respond to public, but I just want to make these 2 points. Halifax Public Schools, as well as Bertie, they are 100% Title I schools. Bertie has 7 schools, Title I schools. For them to go 100% CEP, it's easy because let's say they were receiving $1 million for Title I money, and that $1 million was distributed to those 7 schools. Once they decide to go CEP 100%, there's no impact because every school was receiving the Title I money already. In our case, not all our schools are Title I. If we go that direction, that means if there were 20 schools that they were getting money out of Title I, now you're going to distribute that to 56. Therefore, there are going to be schools, let's say C.C. Spalding, that may need additional teacher position. They're going to lose it because the money has to be spread throughout all the 56 schools.
All right, I'm going to start with board members and I'll come over to you, Commissioner Lum. I'm going to go with Ms. Byer and then Ms. Valladares.
Thank you. So I just want to start kind of even going back to the previous conversation to celebrate the partnership between both our leadership and our elected officials and our commitment to the capital needs that we talked about and planning going forward, but also feeding children. What I'm still struggling to understand, and this is the first time our board has seen this data, just to be clear, this is new to us as well in this conversation, is what is the impact between Dr. Stewart's Title I concerns. Is there a dollar figure that we are not understanding, that would negatively impact what we can do in schools and those positions that you're talking about? That seems like a piece that we still are yet to determine.
How many Title I schools we have?
Oh,
We have a total of
Let's say we're receiving $15 million for Title I money. Whatever formula that we use, then we set the money aside to distribute to those Title I schools. Let's say those schools are not all our elementary schools, probably few middle school. Let's say 35 of our 50 schools, they're going to share that portion of, just an example, $10 million. If we go CEP, and then the other 21 schools qualify as well, that money, the $10 million, need to be spread with those 56 schools. Which means if one school, for example, was getting $1,000, now they will go down to $800. So with that $1,000, if they were able to afford 2 teaching positions, they may not be able anymore. That's the impact that we are concerned.
and that impact would be decided beyond local control. We couldn't decide locally, these are actually our funds to distribute in the most impactful way that we want, school by school. We would.
Formulas that Stewart will be able to explain. We have to follow the formulas.
But we could theoretically change our allocations in other ways in our allotment formulas to balance that in some way, perhaps.
Again, when it comes to those allotment state funds, they are really limited. I think when we use in Title I money, those are additional positions that we have to add. Unless you have additional state funds or local funds to be able to cover those gaps. So we're not getting more from state. It's just based on ADM. The only flexibility we have is going to be local funds.
And what is the, sorry, what is the 1.5 million benefit that is on this slide then? Gain. I see a gain, a green. Maybe it's clear to others. It isn't, it's still not clear to me.
I think introductions are also important for standing. Good morning again. I'm Matthew Palmer, Senior Executive Director of School Planning and Operational Services, where I support school nutrition and transportation. With me this morning, as well as Dr. Lyndon Thayer, our Assistant Director of Food Systems Planning. We're happy to go as deep into the financial data as you want to, particularly around CEP. Dr. Thayer is going to elaborate more on what that 1.1 is from the federal. It may be helpful to pull up the slide, or we can just narrate it. It's your call.
You can go, we'll pull up the slide, but y'all can go ahead and start.
Dr. Thayer, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. So the 1.1 that we would gain, right, is around a couple of things. One, increased participation. And so increased reimbursement for each kind of student, whether right in CEP, everyone pays, everyone participates free of charge. So we get a small amount for every student who pays a meal when we are in free and reduced, and we get more for reduced lunch, and we get the full amount from the federal government for free meals. Under CEP, we would just gain some dollars for each student who participates across the board. And we also right now are serving universal breakfast already, and we are absorbing the cost of those paid breakfasts. So under CEP, we would suddenly gain all of those federal dollars we're not accessing currently. And in the alternative model, if the school board or the county were to help us pay for the paid meal portion, we still wouldn't get those federal dollars for each of those meals served.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to Ms. Valladares, Ms. Carter Alton, then I'm coming over to Commissioner Alum.
This is very important, and a very important discussion. One of the things that I do notice is that your work with nutrition services would be best explained like looking at the data, right? And I go on the website and I can see, you know, the cost of a free meal, free and reduced lunch, What I don't see is usage. I know that that is also another issue that we have where underutilization of our meals is a big challenge. Parents have come up to me. I recently went to the Hispanic Heritage celebrations, and parents just had all kinds of feedback to give about, food waste and the number of meals that are either not consumed, the ways that they feel like the program needs to improve. And I dream of 100% schools having free and reduced lunch, but I'd like for you to talk to us a little bit more about, not at this moment, but maybe in a future presentation, just really talking about what does that percentage look like by school? How many children are actually taking advantage of the free breakfast program? Where are the schools where we're seeing that, we're seeing higher utilization versus underutilization of the program? Because I think all this data is going to help us get to a good place where we can actually provide not only a numerical quantity of kids accessing the lunches, but also like quality. When we hear from families all the time about the quality of our food. I know that there's a lot in our website that talks about the menus. So anybody can go on the website and see the menu, see what are some of the provisions for allergies and other things. But in terms of utilization, I'm very interested in seeing those numbers on the website. They're not there by school, including the CEP schools that we have. Is it 20%? I'm believing, and I want to be proved wrong because it's all by hypothesis. Is it 20%, including in CEP schools? Because I talk to kids all the time. My colleagues know I send them pictures when kids send me the pictures of their school lunch and say, this is what we're getting. No, and they're having to do DoorDash. And we're trying to navigate that. They're having to do other options. And some of them are actually going without the meal because what they're being presented is not something that they find appetizing. And that is a concern we have to address even as we work towards 100% CEP. So I just wanted to lift that up, that our data needs to also include utilization. And on the website, you don't find that at all. But you do find the schools that have free and reduced percentages. Some of them are under 40%. And it kind of goes into that. Like we have some schools like Watts, Easley, and other schools that are under that 40%, and they're not a Title I school. And so how do we continue to do both, work towards 100% CEP, but address where we're at right now and get that data that is so important to get the full picture of how the meals are working and how we can improve the quality. Thank you.
All right, just two brief comments. And one, Jim has all of the data we can certainly share, but as an example, we added 9 schools this year to our list of CEP schools. And across those schools, we're seeing an average between 13 and 19% increase in participation, just from going from a paid meal model to a free model. And we see nationally that we get at least a 10% participation increase when you go to a free model for students, regardless of addressing any quality concerns. And it's really important for us to start here with universal access to all meals, CEP for all students, because that helps us address something that is very intangible and really important, which is stigma. And so in our CEP schools, school meals can become part of the ethos and something that everyone does together. And then from there, we can build on what do kids want. So for example, we just launched our Unbox program, which is a youth food policy council for all of Durham public schools, excuse me. It's middle and high school students. They come from across the district and they're working with us on becoming advocates for the changes they want to see in their programs. So we're turning everything on its head and asking the students to be at the center because this should be a program by and for them. So we just launched that, right? We have a long way to go, but CEP is going to give us a lot of extra space to take what they're telling us they need and run with it.
Yeah. All right. Ms. Carter Alton, and I'm coming over to Commissioner Long.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate this discussion and the comments and questions from my fellow board members. I have similar questions, so thank you for raising those. And I'm really excited about the possibility of feeding all of our kids and feeding them really good food. I am concerned, though, about the possibility of our schools that are most vulnerable, which are our existing Title I schools, possibly losing some of their funding and losing positions. So I just want to understand a little bit better. So I understand that we would still have the same pot of Title I funding, but it would be now distributed among more schools, right? So that's a given. But our allocation formulas that come from the state, we already adjust them, right? When we think about how much money we give to each school. So can we further adjust those formulas in response to this to continue providing the most vulnerable schools, those that might be losing funding, to give them additional funding at the local level if our Title I funding will be decreasing for those schools? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think the answer is yes, but we would need to use our local funding. So we would need to make sure that we secure a local funding source for those schools.
No, but move it. Like move it if I'm gonna give some examples. So like if DSA is now gonna be getting Title I funding, but they don't need it, take some of their other funding to give it to CC Spalding that's losing Title I funding. Right?
We would need to make those decisions as a board, and then we would need to talk to our county folks if we need to increase our funding. I don't want us to try to solve in here today, just because I think it's complex, right? And I think there's probably a formula that we need to look at from a staff perspective, because I think your question is right on, Ms. Carter-Alton, but how do you determine which schools need which? I think that we want staff to do some digging on looking at multiple factors to make that decision. I'm cautioning us because I don't want people to leave saying we're taking money from one school and moving it to another. That's not what we're saying today. But I do think what we're saying is we want to figure this out. So how do we do that? And I think your question is leading us in that direction.
Yeah, I'll also say this, your point is relevant, but we gotta understand the way we get funded from the state. I'll say 001 position. That's the position they give us for teachers. They don't give us dollar allotment. They give us position. You may have a position, a teacher position that costs about $50,000 plus benefits may end up about $75,000. But if we have to go ahead and use Title I money, which is a dollar allotment, it may not equate to the position allotment, which can go 50 or it can go $90,000. It's really technical, it's really complicated, but my comment is going to be this. Kids that are well fed, they will have opportunity to be educated. That's the desire of all of us. That's the reason why we started with 19 CP school. Now we increase it by 8 or 9 more. Give us time to work on that carefully, not trying to jeopardize the growth that we've been able to make with other schools by giving them those additional positions. Because if we remove those additional positions, they're gonna have negative impact. As you can tell, I have my operation folks here, my federal funds folks. We are not in agreement because it's really complicated, but we all want the same thing.
Excuse me, Dr. Mabenga, Paul would like to make a statement and I'd like to follow up.
All right, can y'all make it brief over there?
I will. So one of the things the General Assembly is looking at is going to a dollar allotment for school districts down the road, 24, 25, maybe even. In doing that, we still have to fund and pay for our teachers. I mean, that is a given. With the dollar allotments and position allotments, with the position allotments, we benefit from it tremendously because the state, as Dr. Mabenga mentioned, will pick up the cost of that teacher's total package. So we put our highest paid teachers in our state PRC 001. So it's gonna get trickier as we go. Because if it goes to a dollar allotment, it's not guaranteed anymore, and we're gonna have to live within our funding. It's gonna become much more complicated as we move forward. And that's just reality of where the General Assembly's been headed over the past 6, 7 years to try to go to $1 per student allocation. We want to make sure that we can take care of that when that changeover occurs. And that would be moving money around. Yeah, you could do that, but that would not, we have to be intentional in how we allocate our positions in dollars.
And last comment, just simply back to board members Byers' question earlier. So we have a total of 35 Title I schools. Of those, 27 are CEP schools. Prior to this year, there were 14 Title I CEP schools, and we added 8. As a result of adding 8 of those Title I schools to be CEP schools, it impacted 21 teaching positions across the Title I schools. And as a result, we needed $1.2 million to supplement and sustain the teaching positions that were lost as a result of Title I dollars. And we're grateful that we were able to support those positions with ESSER funding that would end at the end of this year. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind us there's an election in 2024 and that there are some members of the General Assembly who are up for election. And they also have a role not only in funding teacher positions, but in this child nutrition, right?
Yeah.
Over the pandemic, the state made decisions to have free lunch and breakfast for all students. So many of our students benefited from that. The state made a decision not to continue that program. I just want to be clear. So we're figuring it out locally. I'm gonna come over to the commissioners and then I want to wrap this up because I know we have a couple people who have public comment and we have more agenda items.
I'll be quick. My first question, and I apologize in advance if I'm trying to oversimplify a very complex conversation, but just from this presentation and from the conversations, it's seeming to me like the CEP option is the option that is best, like money-wise and reach to the most number of students. Is that a fair judgment or assessment?
That's correct, but
Okay.
we gotta proceed cautiously. That's what we're doing. That's why we added few more this year.
Okay. Then that answers my first question. And then my second was kind of a follow-up to School Board Member Valladares' questions about like the actual taste and quality of the meals, and also like to conversation I'm sure she's also had and other folks have had is the cultural inclusivity of these meals. And, you know, a lot of times when we have immigrant students and students of other backgrounds coming in, and when they have limited food options, they're not going to opt for that meal, and like their families aren't going to know what ingredients are in these meals. And if like, you know, if it's a Muslim student, they're not going to know if there's pork or something in a meal. So they just opt to not have that meal and the student doesn't eat. So what ways can we have more culturally inclusive meals within our schools that are more nutritious and better quality? And also what partnerships can we have? Like, I think we already have some with like local farmers and North Carolina farmers to have more fresh food.
I'm gonna let James Caton to come and make some comments, but I'll say this. This is pretty much a continuous improvement. We've been having those conversations how we can improve the quality and the taste of the food that some of our young folks desire.
Yes, I'll try to be very brief, but as far as cultural inclusivity, we've been working on that this year through our menus. We identify all pork items as, like, we had a pork chorizo sausage item a couple weeks ago. Pork is not generally on our menu, but we do want to offer that to the students who do want that as an option, but we identify it as such. We've been working with local farmers. We've been bringing in produce from Farmer Food Share. We've been bringing in food from First Hand Foods, which is a Durham-based meat company. We're working with a lot of local bids this school year. And Dr. Thayer's been working very well with training staff on new cooking methods, creating new menu items, and we've shown that the participation really is increasing. And to the point of better food, higher quality food, I just want people to realize that's a very objective thing. When I used to work as the retail director at Duke Hospital, people would constantly say the cafeteria needs to serve healthier food. But if you put out fried chicken next to like a ratatouille, they're going to eat the fried chicken. And even if they put on a survey that that's not what they want. And as far as kids going out for DoorDash, things like that, we can't use fryers. We can't use sodium. We can't use sugar. We can't use fat. We're restricted by federal regulations. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but those are very, very serious barriers to our ability to provide what people consider good food. As far as healthy, it meets the nutrition standards of the United States government, and all of the meal patterns meet the nutrition standards. So it's subjective. So thank you.
One last just follow-up comment is, can we make sure that on the county side, Mary Oxendine, our food insecurity coordinator, is looped into these conversations, because it impacts her work, I think, very greatly on the county side of how do we address food insecurity and making sure our children are fed.
We can make sure that happens. I'm gonna pass it over to Chair Howerton. She has to leave.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jet. I got another appointment, but I just want to thank Durham Can for coming to the county when they spoke to me about this, to make sure that we're bringing this conversation up, and then having the conversation with Chair Armstead to get it on the agenda today, because we both felt that this is important, that we need to address it. And I sense that both bodies are on board with this. So I've got to run, but we're going to leave it to our manager and our superintendent to bring back the information that we need to move forward. Does that work for? Okay, great. So thank you, guys. I've got to go.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this together. And I also want to recognize the hallway is packed outside with folks who are here. So thank you all for being here, all the Durham Can folks and everyone else on this issue. I was recently at Glenn Elementary with the governor, and a bunch of other folks in the room were here too. And I heard one of the speakers say, food is the most important school supply. That's really, really stuck with me. And getting back to what you said as well about that, I wish I could repeat what you said, but thank you for talking about this issue as well. So I do think this is a huge priority, and we need to figure out what is the best way to implement it. It seems like following the CEP model would be understanding, as you all have brought up, the same questions that I had about, I think we have to understand the holistic impact and figure out how we're going to address it, because we certainly don't want to take away the instructional positions. But my question is also related to what I saw at Glenn, that for us to think holistically, they had this classroom, breakfast in the classroom program, which was amazing to see kids come in, pick up their food and get to work. And what really blew me away was the achievement data that they had at Glenn that showed, with the increased, more kids eating breakfast, enjoying their food and doing their work, that the correlation with the achievement scores at Glenn. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that this is about student achievement. So I guess going back to what, and you guys, you have such an A team over here, your nutrition staff. What thoughts you all do have? You mentioned the unboxed, but I heard conversation over Glenn about, for high school students, grab and go, because a lot of kids don't want to go to the cafeteria. We all eat differently than we used to eat. We do it ourselves. I mean, half the time I'm eating my lunch in my car. So, just how will we also be thinking about how we are making it easy for kids to actually, eat food and make those choices. So I guess I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, if it was possible.
Sure. So recently we've been working with individual schools based on their individual needs, and we need to go back and revisit those, especially with high schools. Northern High School, we've implemented a lot of grab and go and a la carte. Riverside, due to their power lunch, we've put kiosks throughout the building to give kids opportunities for meals. Middle college students, we now have an app where they go in and they text what they want, and then we bring them exactly what they want. So we're individualizing that mode with each high school. Elementary is a little different because the kids all line up, all come through a serving line. So the high schools really are the structure that we're looking at school by school and what we can do to impact those growth.
Well, thank you. That's really impressive. And I guess my other question is, how quickly could we roll this out if we're going to try to implement it? Would it be for the next school year? Or would we be planning for that? What would the timeline look like?
I think let us spend some time, because we need to make some decisions on our end, and if we think there's a budget ask, we can bring that to you pretty soon. And we can do that for this upcoming year, but I think we need to spend some time figuring out how we I think braiding is what's coming into mind, the funding sources to make sure that we are having our educators have what they need as far as instruction, as well as having the food pieces. Ms. Rogers, did you have a question?
I did, and it really is for the future. As we go into this conversation, I'm concerned, like Commissioner Jacobs, about the execution. We worked really hard to bring our nutrition workers up to a higher pay, but we all know that when you're working in fast food, it's not the best way to work. And that's essentially what we're asking them to do with elementary school students, getting about 25-minute lunch break. So what does it look like when 100% of the students are using the cafeteria for eating? I know it's one of the reasons why my son doesn't do lunch at school, because the line is too long. It's not efficient. The food, once you get it, you may not be able to eat it because it's time to go back to class. Also remembering that in this period, it is our duty to teach students a healthy relationship with food, and grabbing and going and eating in our car might not be, while it might be efficient, it might not be the way we should be developing a work-life balance. I want to make sure that we keep that in mind as we go forward, because that is going to be a factor, I think, for many members of our board as to whether or not we want to put that extra impact on those nutrition workers and on our students in that way.
All right, y'all, I'm 1 minute. Ms. Valladares.
My 1 minute comment is that this is something that we all care about. I've met with Durham Can. I've seen some of your faces in a meeting, and I appreciate the advocacy, and we will continue having conversations. Let's not make this political in the sense that there's nobody on here. None of our administration is opposed to this. Believe me, when they have made their comments, they have been really, really intentional and have answered emails. I have asked them questions. You have asked them questions. They are here to tell you about the complications of how this process works. We're going to work towards that. What we do ask is, more feedback. I mean, we've had presentations in the past. If you go to board docs, you will see a presentation by our director, Jim Keaton, talking about the fresh foods, like having fresh carrot vegetables that nobody wants to eat. And there's been a lot of improvement over time. We're going to get more data. I think the utilization data is going to be very important to kind of see what schools are using, how many children are actually accessing these meals. But just work with us. Let us get more data. Let us have more conversations. But we're all on board with this. There's not one person, and I do not want any of our administration being scapegoated about not wanting to feed kids. That is not the question. That is never the question. And we're willing to have more conversations with you after this meeting. Anytime, we will show up. Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation, the information from so many people that are involved. Thank you to my colleagues and those comments that you just made. We all have the same goal in mind. And I just want to bring to your attention equality versus equity. And we are an equity-focused district, and the complexities that we're talking about, balancing between CEPs and Title I schools, that's what's really at heart at the work to move this forward the way it needs to be done and done well with a comprehensive plan that includes food, access, waste, time. All of those things are important as well. I'll just say, who is not here? When we're talking about Title I positions from the schools that are 99% low socioeconomic status, how important is it to them that we do this right and take our time so they're not losing positions? When we talk about closing the opportunity gap in academics, it is that curriculum and instruction time and having additional time to learn, as well as being fed. So just know that we're all on the same page here. Consider what equity looks like, and that's what our district is doing. Thank you to my colleagues for this time.
I'm going to move us to our next item. Thank y'all so much. And thank you to all the people who have joined us today. I think you heard clearly, this is a goal of ours. How we get there is what we still need to figure out. Again, in service of doing what's best for our children. So Dr. Chappelle, does anyone have questions on your report? Is that okay if I do it that way? Yeah, it happens often. I'm sorry.
I understand. I want to say two things to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Besides read your report because it has some great information. But I just want to point out that, Chair Umstead, you mentioned braided funding, and our pre-K program in Durham is absolutely the heart of braided funding. which means that the collaboration is key. But to report to you for local purposes, the local dollars right now, your local dollars are funding 653 preschool seats this school year. And we're hovering at about a 92% enrollment rate. We're enrolling children every day. So that is not all the preschool seats in Durham, and we'll report on those as those numbers come available in the new year. But I want to point out one thing to you. We had a successful launch of our new early childhood apprenticeship program, which is the largest early childhood apprenticeship program in the state of North Carolina, even though it just started. And we signed yesterday, 40 apprentices signed their contracts. What does that mean for the district? What does that mean for Durham? It means that we are building capacity for high quality teachers in Durham. The apprenticeship programs have both 2-year and 4-year degree options, which means that apprentices can get those degrees without any debt, 0 debt, 100% covered tuition. Each apprentice gets a mentor, an experienced mentor that is a paid mentor, as well as they are being paid while working in our early childhood program. So this is phenomenal, and the response from the community has been amazing, and I invite you to learn more about it. So look at your report, and we look forward to more time on the agenda in the future.
All right, next time we're gonna put you off first. Commissioner Carter, real quick.
Linda, there was something I read somewhere, probably your report, that said there is a waiting list because some parents prefer certain locations. And I just wondered if you could explain that a little bit more.
Sure. In Durham, we have a universal application process, which is a goal of many communities, but not many achieve it. And because of our braided seats, some seats have specific requirements for eligibility, whereas your local dollars are universally available seats. Some families prefer a particular location. Once that location is filled, we do everything we can to encourage them to explore other locations. But some families have really good reasons they want a certain one. They have the option to go over to the wait list, and sometimes a seat opens up. But we work with them closely to try to encourage them to consider other locations. And we also work with them on what the barriers are for them, because many families, it's not about just having a choice for a certain site. There are very real reasons they need a certain site. And so, yes, we do have a few, but that is not the bulk. It is a small amount, and I can be sure and address that in the next report so that you can have some, specific data.
Especially like about what the barriers might be and what we could.
Oh, sure. And, some of the barriers are traditional transportation,
Yeah.
Work schedules, whether wrap care is available, before and after school. Those are some key ones that we've done a lot of work on and we continue to struggle with. So, but I can be sure and address that in a more broken down way in the next report.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Dr.
everything.
Spell. We will put you first next time. All right, the next item on our agenda is the meeting schedule for 2024. I want to go ahead and put out there, it's been noted to us that you all have conflicts on February and in August on the meeting. You just committed to a joint meeting together. I think you all have a city, county, something. So what I'll do is I'll ask our clerks to work together to reschedule our February meeting. It's February and August, I think, were their conflicts. So I'll ask our clerks to work together to reschedule those so we can have an agenda for 2024. That sound okay? All right. Ms. Valladares.
30 seconds of comment. Linda, I just want to apologize. This is the second time, and there are a lot of people who are watching who are saying, our commitment is to have 2 preschool classrooms for every school construction that we have. Like Murray Massenburg is about to be in operation. And so I just want you, if there's anything that you can say about that and ways that we can be more supportive and obviously give you your airtime, because you deserve that airtime. And I feel so terrible. It's the second time. I think we need to put you ahead of other items on the next agenda.
But I will say we meet with district leadership every month, and we are on track to have 2 classrooms at the new school, just as we opened 2 classrooms when Lions Farm opened. So we're making progress. We need to do more, but we're making progress.
Thank you for all you do.
All right, I'm going to open this back up to public comment because we know we had a few people join us. So I'm going to do a quick review of the rules again. First, please state your name. If you're speaking for organization, state the name of the organization. I'm gonna ask our commenters to present your comments within 2 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you'll have 1 minute left. When the red light comes on, it indicates that your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we're very interested in hearing your concerns. We will listen carefully to your comments, but we will not engage in discussion with speakers. So our first person will be Walt Barron. Sorry, that's a leftover from the earlier, and then we'll come to you all.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me this time and being flexible about the scheduling of this. I'd like to talk about the DSA, the decision to relocate DSA. I am a 19-year resident of Durham. Our 2 daughters were both born here, grew up in the Durham public school system. Still, both of them still attend Durham public schools, and we love it. And thank you for what you all have decided to spend a lot of your time and energy and wisdom to benefit my students and others, my kids and other students. When I moved here, I lived downtown for a short bit while I was relocating, and I was just walking around downtown one night and I saw a big crowd gathered at a street, and I was really curious. So I approached and I realized that it was a protest, and they were protesting a performance that was being put on inside what turned out to be Durham School of the Arts, which I did not know about at the time. And it was a play about Matthew Shepard. If you all remember that, a really tragic story. But there were people for and against. I decided I'm going to go in and see this play. I was by myself, had nothing else to do. I was blown away by the performance, but I was also blown away by the courage of this school to put this on. And it struck me how we had this school in the middle of downtown that is able to engage with the community, with people like me. At the time, I did not have any kids. I was just an average Joe walking around the street. But all of a sudden, I felt connected to Durham through DSA. And I understand the benefits and the allure of a brand new building in new construction. So much of what is needed. I'm also really concerned about what we will lose by taking the education out of downtown and moving it farther out. All of the benefits that I know that my daughter, who now is a freshman at DSA, gets from that. I don't know all of the details, but what I do know that as a parent, as a neighbor, a resident of Trinity Park, and listening to the teachers, the students, my fellow peers and neighbors, that there's a lot of concern about what we are going to lose, both for the kids' education and the connection to the neighborhood if we do this. And I know it's a difficult decision when you've got a vision that you've worked so hard toward, and then you're presented with new information like the rising costs and like concerns that me and others that are breathing. But I do ask that you consider pausing this decision just to consider and take into account this new information. And if it would help, I know I'm running out of time, if it would help to show that this is more than just me, I would like to offer to get a petition to show you that there are others who would encourage you to pause and just take a breath to consider the new information.
Thank you, Mr. Barron.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Sarah Jackson Cohen. Oh, there we go. Hi, Sarah. Followed by Norma Portillo.
Hello. Thanks for giving us a chance to speak again. My name's Sarah Jacobson Cohen. I'm a Durham resident, a parent of 2 little future Durham Public School students, government relations director with the American Heart Association, and member of the North Carolina Alliance for Health, School Meals for All, and C Coalition. I just want to go back to the community eligibility provision conversation and voice my support and the support of many others for Durham County to choose to participate countywide with the community eligibility provision. All of our students deserve school meals. I know there are some funding and administrative questions to work out, but we believe that you all can do it. It was great to hear the conversation in the room. This will be good for Durham County's education growth. You're looking at all the provisions in ESSA, looking at the quality of education. If all of our students are getting fed, they are going to do better. It will be good for their health outcomes, their education outcomes. And we know these are hard times for families in Durham County. Our students need to eat. They need to eat during the school day. They are worth it, and our community is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Norma Patillo and Romila Salgado after that.
Hello. So I believe Norma is still okay. That way. Okay. Yeah, and she wasn't able to be here right now. But my name is Jessica, and I too was in Durham Public Schools, and I actually graduated from Durham School of the Arts. So I'm actually excited that my daughter, who is currently at Durham School of the Arts, will be able to one day be in that new building. So I'm very excited about that. And going back to the conversation about the meals, I remember as a child, my mom pulling me and my siblings out to go up to another school or another building. And we were like, Mom, why? It's a Saturday. Why do we have to do this? We want to watch our cartoons. Why? We didn't know why back then. But now I understand that my mom had a hard time dragging us out the door to go fill out that annoying little form for us to have free school lunch. It is now not really available for families to fill out hand form. Somebody needs to help them. I have had families come to my house or I go to their house to help them do the online form because they do not understand. The first time I filled out that online form, I had a hard time filling it out as well. And I had to ask for a teacher to help me figure it out on my phone. And it was actually easier to do on a computer. We have computers. Do all those families have computers? No, they do not. And that's why they're coming over to my house or I am going over to their house. So please help us feed our children. My children do not qualify. We do not qualify for those free or reduced meals. And that is okay because we are personally doing better. But I am speaking on behalf of those families that do not have the same opportunities. Our government does not have the big picture of what our community struggles with day to day. With our community is working in construction areas. Sometimes in some seasons, our community does not have a job. Therefore, scrambling to find another job that is within the season. Therefore, our government does not represent our actual day-to-day income. CEP, I believe, and we believe, as a community, is the better option. Yes, I do not want our teachers to lose their positions as well, but our families need this. Please help us feed our children, therefore to strive better and perform better overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Romelia Salgado or Aneli Garcia? Okay. Okay. All right, with that, then we will close our meeting. I want to say, before we dismiss, thank y'all so much. Our boards have been through many iterations, and I really appreciate the partnership that we have together, whether we're talking about school funding or child nutrition or academic data, which we all covered today. It's clear that all of us have in the best interest our students and our students first, and how do we do what we can to make sure they can achieve. So thank y'all so much. Hope everyone has a good holiday season. We'll be back in February.